A pleasant morning to all invited guests, principal, teachers, students, parents, and other attendees. I am Dr. Kim Newton-James, Technical Officer for Chemical and Solid Waste Management at the Environmental Health and Sustainable Development Department, CARPAH, which is located in St. Lucia. I'm also the coordinator of this student activity, and I will be your moderator for this session. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week student webinar entitled Lead Paint Study in St. Lucia. This year, the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is being commemorated from October the 25th to the 31st. And so far, it has been a week full of awareness. And one of the messages, the key messages I might add, is that lead paint is a major source of poisoning among children. Countries all over the world are doing their part to bring awareness to this issue and to take action to ban or to put legal controls in place to prevent lead in paint. It is important for our children to do their part in increasing awareness and advocacy on the lead paint poisoning issue. I am confident that you will leave this session inspired and motivated to take action. I will now go through a few housekeeping matters. All attendee videos and microphones will remain off throughout the duration of this webinar. The webinar will be in 3 parts: remarks, followed by the student presentation, and finally, the answer and question session. We ask that all questions be placed in the chat. These will be answered by the student panelists during the answer question session. At this point, I would now like to introduce Mr. Bradshaw Isaac, the officer in charge of the Sustainability Development Department of CARPAH here in St. Lucia. He is going to give us a few opening remarks. So I turn you over to Mr. Isaacs.
A pleasant good morning to you all. On behalf of our Executive Director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, Dr. Joy St. John, and our Director of the Surveillance, Disease Prevention and Control Department, Dr. Lisa Indar, and the team from the Environmental Health and Sustainable Development Department, I welcome you to this International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week student webinar, Lead Paint Study in St. Lucia. International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is recognized October 25th to 31st, and the aim is to draw attention to the health impact of lead exposure, highlight efforts by country and partners to prevent childhood lead exposure, and accelerate efforts to phase out the use of lead in paint. This year's focus is to accelerate progress towards global phase out of lead paint through regulatory and legal matters. CARPAH is pleased to offer support to this worthy cause in partnership with international, regional, and national agencies. We are especially pleased to partner with the Dame Pearlette Primary School to make this initiative and the activity of this day a success. I would like to say a special thank you to the principal, the teachers, the students, and their parents for the support and dedication to this cause, despite the many challenges being offered by the COVID pandemic in St. Lucia at this time. It is said in a biblical term that a child shall lead us, And so today we find it quite fitting that 3 students will share the findings of research conducted with their classmates and hereby lend a voice towards the fight against lead poisoning prevention. The impact of lead poisoning on health is well researched, and children are recognized as a vulnerable group. Exposure to lead can seriously harm child's health, including damage to brain and nervous system, slowed growth and development, learning and behavioral problems, and hearing and speech problems. No safe lead level in children has been identified. However, we all acknowledge that lead poisoning can be prevented, and we all have a part to play. With that said, I use this opportunity to once again applaud the organizers, the partners that conceptualized this initiative and today's activity, and as bring it to fruition. I wish for a successful webinar and one that will have far-reaching effect. In closing, I'd like to make mention of an e-book that was also developed as part of the activities in recognition of this week. The e-book, however, is posted on the CARPAH's website, and it is available for your viewing. We invite you to look at this ebook and be informed. I thank you again for your participation, and I hope for a good webinar. Thank you.
So this gives us all an insight into the sort of global action and into the importance of the lead paint issue and how it is being tackled on a global level. Finally, I now invite our guest from the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, represented by Ms. Zamala Haynes Joseph, head of the Department of the Standards Development at the Bureau. Mrs. Haynes enjoys standards work and thinks standards should be the building block in our business and operations, and even in life. Her personal mantra is that standards are ingrained in her DNA. Mrs. Haynes will give us an update on the current status of lead paint standards in the CARICOM region and St. Lucia. So I welcome Mrs. William. With that, we will now dive into our presentations. I would like to introduce our 3 student presenters from grade 6 of the Dame Pearlette Primary School. Our first presenter is Jarrell William. His hobby is drawing and he likes science, and he hopes to become a marine biologist one day. Our second presenter is Shanice Says. Her hobbies are singing and dancing. Shanice likes spending time with her family, friends, and she has big plans for her future. And finally, we have Mateo Samuel. His hobbies are playing football and playing outside. And he, of course, is happy to be part of this activity. With that, I will turn you over into the capable hands of our student presenters.
Good day, everyone. Today I am going to be presenting our study on lead in paint done in St. Lucia. Today's presentation will consist of a background, our objectives, the methods we employed to collect this data, our results, discussion, conclusions, recommendations, future research and actions, as well as acknowledgements. To start off, let's review some of the terms that will be used in this presentation today. Lead, a naturally occurring toxic metal found in the Earth's crust, and its uses include lead-acid batteries, paints, solder, ammunition, ceramic, jewelry, toys, and cosmetics. Paint. This focuses on oil-based paints, which include varnishes, lacquers, stains, enamels, glazes, primers, and other coatings. Lead paint. Paint to which one or more lead compounds have been added for specific properties. Lead poisoning refers to excessive human exposure to lead. Safety Data Sheet, SDS, or Material Safety Data Sheet, MSDS, provides information on hazardous chemicals, properties, health and environmental health hazards, protective measures, etc. from the manufacturer. Lead. Lead is used in paint because it causes the paint to dry faster, gives better colors, and also prevents corrosion. Lead is mainly added to some solvent-based paints. Although manufacturers may not intentionally add lead, small amounts may be present in the raw materials. There are lead-free paints on the market. Paint is a major source of exposure to lead. There is no safe level of lead exposure. Lead exposure can occur when paint decays or when removing paint from walls. Exposure occurs through ingestion of contaminated soil or dust, inhalation of contaminated particles. Lead has many toxic effects to many body systems, such as the nervous system and digestive systems. Who is most at risk? Young children. Their brain and nervous system are still developing. They also absorb more lead for their size, about 4 to 5 times more than adults. Due to this, children also experience many adverse health effects, which include reduced intelligence quotient, IQ, reduced attention span, and behavior problems. Women are also at risk if exposed to lead. Lead stored in the body can be reduced during pregnancy, breastfeeding, and menopause. It is dangerous to the baby as it causes reduced fetal growth, low birth weight, and preterm birth. Our aims are to increase awareness of the harmful effects of lead in paints, to encourage the use of safer chemicals in manufacturing, and to encourage the use of enforceable standards to control lead levels in paint. From our aims, we were able to identify 2 main objectives: to describe the situation of lead paint in St. Lucia, and to make recommendations based on the results. My colleague Mateo will now take you through our methods employed to collect data.
This is Samuel, and I'll be taking you through the methods. Part 1. Participating in a CARPAH presentation held by CARPAH, which explains lead and the issues related to lead, as well as participating in International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. Also participating in a presentation held by the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards to recognize the importance of standards and to protect our health and the environment from lead. Part 2, the steps we did to organize this presentation. Step 1, data collection. Informal interviews, examine paint labels, and internet research. Step 2, we put all our information together in a table. Step 3, data analysis. Look for patterns in the data so we could get ready for our last step. Step 4, draw conclusions. We made recommendations and put all our information together. Now I will take you over to Shanice Sills to show our results.
Good morning, I am Shanice Sills, and today I will show you the results of our research. The results. We have placed our paint brands into 3 categories. Our first category is local. It is manufactured locally in St. Lucia. Our second category is regional, meaning it was manufactured in the Caribbean region, in the countries of Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago. Our last category is international, meaning manufactured outside of the Caribbean region, in countries like Brazil, Canada, China, and the USA. This pie chart shows the percentage by paint brands categories identified in the study out of 19 brands. 5% of brands were manufactured locally, while 21% of brands were manufactured regionally, and 74% of brands were manufactured internationally. This pie chart shows the percentage of brands with lead content on the labels out of 19. 7% of brands had labels which contained information on lead, while 93% of brands did not contain any information on lead. This pie chart shows the percentage of brands with the SDS available on the website. SDS also stands for Safety Data Sheets. 23% of brands had no SDS available on the website, while 77% of brands had the SDS on the website. The websites where the SDS were not found proved difficult to navigate. None of the SDS examined contained specific information about the lead content. One regional brand had a line of paints labeled as lead-free. None of the international brands examined were labeled lead-free. 16% of the brands used in St. Lucia contained kaolin, talc, or organoclave as a raw material. One brand with a lead-free label employed the use of metal dryers. The discussion. Labeling as lead-free may be based on the guidelines or standards used in the country of manufacture. Countries have different limits on total lead concentration in paints, as shown in the next slide. The countries with limits on total lead concentration: 90 parts per million, 100 parts per million, 600 parts per million, and 1,000 parts per million or higher. This pie chart shows the percentage of countries by lead concentration limit. 30.3% of countries had 90 parts per million. 9.1% of countries had 100 parts per million, and 42.4% of countries had 600 parts per million, and 18.2% of countries had 1,000 parts per million or higher. Three Caribbean countries had 600 parts per million as a lead limit for household paints. They are Dominica, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago. 11 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean had lead paint laws, while a whopping 22 countries had no binding limits. The countries in North America both had 90 parts per million as a lead limit for paints. Metallic dryers are added to paints to help them dry quicker when applied. Lead is an example of such a metal. The SDS did not list the type of metal used. The metal dryers found in the SDS was less than 2% wet weight. The Lead Paints Alliance recommends a limit of 90 parts per million, 0.009% of total lead. Clay soils, kaolin, and talc are raw materials used for paints, which may be contaminated with lead. The lead content of these raw materials were not specifically mentioned in the SDS. Local and regional brands have green certification for being environmentally friendly, specifically related to VOCs but not lead. The conclusion. There is uncertainty concerning the lead content in oil-based paints on the St. Lucian market. There is a need to develop national enforceable standards to set maximum limits for lead in paint or laws to prohibit the use, import, and sale of the lead paints. Thank you. And I now hand you over to Mateo.
I will be taking you through the recommendations. The consumers. Be informed about the adverse health effects of lead. Be a discriminating consumer and examine the labels carefully and visit the brand websites. Manufacturers. Ensure that raw materials are lead-free or have low content of lead. Prohibit the use of lead compounds in paint or set a maximum limit for lead through enforceable standards. Manufacturers should include information about the lead content of the raw materials used. Display lead-free messages on paint labels. Our future research and actions. Conduct analysis on paint samples marketed in St. Lucia. Advocate for development of laws to make national standards enforceable and to prohibit the use of lead compounds in paint. Now I take you over to Jarrell.
The limitations of our study. Limited scope. The study only covered paints in the market in Castries and the surrounding areas. SDS or MSDS sheets could not be located online for more information on products. Information from some retailers were limited. So we would like to acknowledge these people. Our student researchers, Vianney Plummer, Phoebe Phillip, Ruben Reynolds, Johnny Pierre-Louis, Ellie St. Jean, Green St. Rose, Elisa Winnett, Jamari Seri, and Sage Xavier. We would also like to acknowledge these teachers, Ms. Karen Malakan, Mrs. Valerie Fletcher, and Mr. John Ross Louis. We have been your presenters, Shanice Sills, Mateo Samuel, and myself, Gerald William. Thank you everyone for listening.
Okay, thank you so much. Excellent job, and I just want to congratulate the students again for their wonderful presentation and keeping us aware and informed of the situation in St. Lucia when it relates to lead in paint. So now we move on to the question and answer session. So we will take your questions, or we'll actually hand them over to the students so they can answer your questions. So we're just going to check in the chat to see if there are any questions. Okay, so I'm getting that we have a lot of commendations for the students on the good job that they have done this morning. So yes, and I will echo that. Excellent work. And they sacrificed a lot, even in these times of COVID, when they were not at school, and basically everything was done with them online. So amazing work, students. Yes.
There is one question in the chat.
Okay. Thank you. I think I'm looking at it. Okay, so we have, it's more or less a statement, and this is from our only manufacturer on the island, and he is pointing out that we are the only manufacturers on the island and would like to note that our paints are manufactured, they are lead free, they don't have lead. That is excellent, excellent. Okay.
You mentioned lead paint.
Yes.
Do you know if there are many local manufacturers of paint?
Okay, so that was the question. Thanks, Shima. You mentioned local paints. Do you know if there are many local manufacturers? And we just sort of answered that question. There's one local manufacturer, and that manufacturer just told us that there's no lead in the paint that they do manufacture. Okay, so more congratulations for the students on a job well done. Great delivery, students. I'll just read through the comments while you think. And if there are no further questions, we'll close in a bit. Excellent speakers, excellent study and presentation. Okay. So, all right. Good. So with that, I will close the question and answer session. But if you still have questions, please feel free to send us your questions and we will answer them for you.
There is one more question, Kim, before you go.
Okay, one more question before we leave. Hold on. Okay.
Are there any plans to lobby for better labeling of paints?
Okay, so the question is, are there any plans to lobby for better labeling of paints? So I think, anybody wants to answer that? Okay, so Mathieu is gonna.
Right now, since we are trying to ban lead in paint or at least prohibit the use of it, I don't think we have done anything about that yet, but it's a good question to ask, but I don't really know what you are planning to do next, but it is a good question to ask, so thank you for your question.
Yes, the intention is to start lobbying our ministry, the relevant ministers, to start looking into some enforceable standards. As Mrs. Haynes said, we do have a lot of standards, but the problem is we need to get legislation to make them mandatory and do not only depend on voluntary actions. And not only looking at the paints manufactured in St. Lucia, but we also have to look at those that are imported, those that are sold from outside the region and outside, those that come in internationally. So yes, there will be a move to lobby our relevant stakeholders. And CARPAH is definitely going to be a part of that. And yes, the students will be involved every step of the way as a continuation to this project or activity.
Kim?
Yes.
If I may just add to that as well, I'm actually happy to indicate that CARPAH is on our chemicals technical committee that oversees the development of the revision or the work on standards for paint. We also have from the industry our local manufacturer serving on our national committee. And these individuals also represent St. Lucia at the regional level where the work is being done by all persons involved from the 15 member states of CARICOM. So it's in a good position really to, I suppose, lobby, if you want to use that word, but really advocate that the standards can have a shift from being a voluntary standard to a mandatory standard. And I just also want to add here that even when a standard is voluntary, it does not mean that there's no legal implications. All it is it gives an opportunity for somebody to say, well, I do follow a standard, even if it's not the national standard, and the product is still okay to pass. But when you make it mandatory, what the country is saying is, we will not accept any other standard but the national standard. So that is really the difference. So a voluntary standard doesn't mean that you don't have to adhere or comply. It just simply means that you have the opportunity to introduce other standards that exist. And it is about us in St. Lucia deciding where we want to set ourselves in terms of protection and as well, we want to ensure we promote industrial efficiency. And if we agree that we want to set our national limits at 90 ppm, which is what's coming out of the revision, then we can decide that this is the only standard we follow and make it a mandatory standard. So there is a brilliant opportunity. There's a lot of work that can happen. And again, I'm advocating that, I'm saying, be the change you want to see. And CARPAH and even our local manufacturer are rightly poised to ensure we have a move towards better standards for paints in St. Lucia.
Okay, thank you so much, Zamala Haynes, Joseph. Thank you for that and clarification as well. Thank you. Great. So I would just like to, in closing, to give special acknowledgements and special thanks for the support and the wonderful experience that our stakeholders have afforded our students today. And that is Ms. Vera Barantes. We know that she's very busy with all the work that she's been doing. Ms. Zamala Hines Joseph, for being so willing to be a supporter and a stakeholder from the very beginning. Mrs. Etheline Leonce, the principal of Dame Pearlette Primary School, who was so willing, when we came to her with this proposal, even with the short time, she willingly accepted and, embraced it and thought it was a good idea and went with it. Also the parents, okay, we couldn't have done it without the parents that provided a lot of the support and a lot of the time with the students, and we even have parents assisting us with the photography. We're so grateful and thankful that you're here today as well, and we hope that you keep supporting your students in the excellent work that they did today and that they will be doing. Also, last but not least, I would like to thank CARPAH administration also for coming on board very quickly with the whole proposal and the ideas behind it and all the information that we have published online on the website, as well as the staff, the communication staff in Trinidad, which is where our headquarters is based, and that is Ms. Avril Isaac and her team also here working behind the scenes. We have Ms. Sherma Arthur, thank you very much, and also Mr. Bradshaw Isaac, who also loved the whole idea of incorporating the children into this activity. So thank you all again, and last but not least, I want to thank our parents that's with us here today, and also all the attendees and other special invited guests. So with that, we have come to the end of our session, and I would like to have you just give us some feedback on the presentation, a little more specific, so we know what area we can improve on in terms of the study as well. The link will be sent to you, and it will also be placed in the chat. So thank you once again, and with that, I formally close this session. Yes. Okay, yes, I'm Dr. Kim Newton-James. I'm the Technical Officer for Chemicals and Solid Waste Management from the Environmental Health and Sustainable Development Department of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPAH, St. Lucia.
Can you tell us, Doctor, it's the 8th year that this thing has been running this week. Is it 8 consecutive years?
Yes, it is 8 consecutive years. So St. Lucia came on board with joining in this sort of global awareness last year, and it all started with myself and another colleague of mine being invited to a meeting in Panama, and this is where it all started, and we came back enthusiastic and ready to take action. And last year we did have a press release, and we got out some information as well.
So this will be the first time you brought in the students to actually be part of the
Yes,
exercise.
so this year we actually brought in the students because we felt that they needed to be a part of this, because as you heard from their presentation, the effects of, they're one of the most vulnerable groups when it comes to lead paint poisoning. So yes.
I'm assuming that, sitting here, I would assume this is a successful one. In future, would you expect to include the secondary school students as well?
Yes, that is one of the things that we're looking at for next year. So we're probably gonna have the same students even do a wider, increase the scope of the activity, because we only looked at the Castries area and environs, but we want to do the entire country. So this is something that we're probably gonna have them continue do, and then we want to bring in the secondary school students in looking in terms of analyzing, collecting samples and conducting analysis on these and doing that sort of link with the brands and the content you actually find. So getting a little more robust data on lead and paint.
Would it be a situation where you also engage, for example, I know that the local manufacturer was very engaged there. Would you be willing to also engage, for example, contractors? These are the guys who actually go there to buy the paints to finish my house and stuff like that.
Oh, definitely, because we have to include all the stakeholders involved. And if it means that we have contractors that are going to be purchasing the paint, yes, they are consumers as well. They will have to be on board. So it's not something that we can just restrict, yes, to the students, primary and secondary, but also we have to bring in the community, contractors, all the different stakeholders are relevant. And we intend on having them on board as well.
My final question is, I know, for example, in the 50s, asbestos was the thing, and then we learned that asbestos was bad, and then we heard CFCs were bad, and then we heard CFCs, and we heard other like mold. Right. That was the other one, mold.
Yeah, that's it.
So these are the things that we've been focusing on of late, but then lead for some reason just fell through, and then Flint, Michigan, brought that up. But, so would you say this week, especially with St. getting into the game with the global
action with the Lead Paint Alliance, yes.
Would you say that the St. Lucia joining the movement last year would have increased that awareness? So it's not just mold and CFCs and the others, it's actually lead, because we still have lead pipes in some areas, and some Castries is filled with less lead and asbestos pipes.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of the lead pipes that we use, because I know there should be some sort of standards when it comes to the types of pipes you use. And if you're still using lead pipes, then yes, there is that possibility of exposure over time. And that is the problem with lead. It is one of those toxicants that builds up over time, and then it does damage. So sometimes it's not immediate. In kids, in children, yes, you may see immediate effects because they're developing, but in adults, this is where you have the issues. You get chronic effects. So later on, after you have had a lot of exposure and accumulation of lead, then you would see the effects. So yes, if there are lead pipes still being used, this is a serious issue. And then yes, lead has been in the forefront, and I think one of our speakers mentioned this, when you look at lead gasoline. Right. And then through global action, we are able to almost eliminate the use of lead, because lead in gasoline, because now you kind of go to the pumps and get gasoline lead. Right. So that is the sort of action that we're looking to take in terms of lead in paint. And we're getting there. We're seeing that a lot of countries, they are actually putting in the sort of limits that you want, but then, as we mentioned, we need to go a step further. We need to make sure that they are mandatory, and not have companies use all sorts of loopholes to to get around these sort of limits and regulations.
Which is why I want to end with this question. For 28 years, our standards have been outstanding when it comes especially to lead. The Economic Bureau standards mention it, that it needs revision from voluntary to mandatory. How much teeth does CARPAH as a regional body have to actually mandate or even pressure regional governments or even at the OECS or CARICOM level to ensure that such legislation goes through? Because we rely heavily on CARPAH right now for coronavirus.
Yes.
CARPAH is a trusted body. Right. How much teeth does CARPAH has, and does CARPAH even lobby to get their legislation mandatory rather than voluntary?
Well, CARPAH, as a regional health organization, we are here to support member states with their needs. So member states would come to us and we give them the support that they need. So one of the ways that we support is by bringing this sort of awareness, right? Giving our technical skills and our technical expertise in the field when needed. So this is an example of how CARPAH can support. So we can work through the ministries, through helping the ministries to get where they want to get to that legislation. And as one of our speakers said, we actually are on the sub-technical committee for lead in paints, and we are part of that revision. So we're going to ensure that, okay, we will try to ensure that this limit is within what is recommended by the Lead Paint Alliance, okay, which is a 90 parts per million. Right? So yes, we are concerned, we are the body that deals with health in the region, but we can only support. We cannot go and tell the governments what they have to do. They have to, yes. So we have other ways that we can support, and these are some of the ways that we can do it.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
Yes, yes.
Can you just look
Now?
Yeah.
Why is this week important?
Yeah.
I feel that this week is important because we have to raise awareness about the dangers of lead and lead exposure in children. Lead exposure is obviously bad, so we need to remove lead from paints, remove lead as a metal dry additive altogether.
That's great.
We have a manufacturer which produces lead-free paint locally, and most of the brands which are imported from overseas, obviously, we are not certain about the amounts of lead in the paint. Then the labeling does not include the necessary information about lead or other metal dryers.
That needs to change. Again. And how old are you?
My name is Shanice Sills and I am 11 years old.
Okay. Can you tell us why do you want to focus on this issue?
Well, there is evidence and concern that lead paint is a significant source of lead exposure, especially to children. The effects in children are intellectual disabilities, underperforming in school, and behavioral issues. And this is because their brain and nervous system are still growing, are still developing. And they come into contact with lead by playing in lead in old cans with paint and their toys, because their toys could be painted with lead paint and they put it in their mouths. And in adults, low levels of exposure can lead to ischemic heart disease and strokes. And for women, lead can be released during menopause, breastfeeding, and pregnancy.
So much.
I think the people who need to change their behaviors are the manufacturers, the consumers, and the Bureau of Standards.
And what do you want? What change do you want to see?
The manufacturers, I want them to stop putting lead in paint or limit the amount of lead in the paint and put labels concerning the amount of lead in the paint. The Bureau of Standards, I want them to impose rules about lead in paint and the limit of lead in paint, or put binding laws for the amount of lead you put in paint. And I also want the consumers to be a discriminated consumer and to be aware of the what paint you're buying and how much lead is in the paint. And if you can't find it on the label, find the website to find out how much lead is in the paint.
Morning, sir, and tell us your name, please.
My name is John Ross Louis.
And can you tell us about being involved in this project? What were some of the things you learned?
So I learned that lead is quite harmful to the body, especially to women, and that just a small dose alone can be very dangerous to the body. So in turn, learning all of this, that whenever you buy paint products, that you should be very careful it has lead in it.
Now we are already going through a COVID phase where folks are faced with challenges already, and then we have a situation where you're learning about another potential danger. How was it working with the students during that difficult time? Were there times when you really felt like I can't commit to this?
No. Besides of the protocols of COVID-19, we just used Plan B, which was online basis techniques. We just made sure that we got the students, whether it be social media or through Zoom, that we got the information out there to them so that the project could be completed.
Now this is the first time CARPAH has actually teamed up with a school. I mean, they jumped into the movement last year, but this year is the first time they ever teamed up with a school, and Dame Pearlette happened to be that school. How do you categorize that kind of honor?
Okay, it's a really great honor that they chose Dame Pearlette Louise Primary School for this, especially since it's an international topic, and that they chose a school to represent, and that so far they're showing that the youth can represent on important international topics.
Which is why I want to ask this final question. Do you think these students are ready for common entrance then?
Definitely. By the performance today, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm Kareem Malakan and I'm a grade 6 teacher.
So you would have been involved in this project. How time consuming was it?
Well, for leading up to this week, the students were mainly responsible for going out with their parents to get the information. So we were guiding, but we were not too involved in this. But this week it was really tough because we were putting the information together, analyzing the results, going through the presentation, practicing. So this week was tough, but we're happy we got through it well.
Now I know Dame Pearlette is known for having smart students. What was the process for selecting these 3 students?
Well, since Dr. Newton James, she approached us, and Mrs. Fletcher and I, since we're grade 6 teachers, we decided to pick the participants from our class and as well as the students researchers. So in picking the participants, we looked at students who were able to represent really well, give very good presentations, and were scientifically minded so that they could collect the data on their own and also participate in the analysis of the data as well.
And how do you grade these 100 students?
Well, I found today they did really well, so I'd definitely give them an A+.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Valerie Fletcher. My name is Valerie Fletcher. My name is Valerie Fletcher.
And can you tell us what subject you teach?
I teach grade 6 at this point, so I'm teaching mainly all the subjects.
And tell us about your involvement in this project with students.
Well, one of the students is from my class, so we had to work with them. So we had to guide them along in doing the research and in putting the research together.
I'm guessing, Miss, that some of the information that you have put together actually were surprising to you as well?
Yes, because I had never done that research before, so I wasn't familiar with what exactly is out there about lead in paint. So yes.
And having seen their performance today, how do you grade them?
They did very well. I'm pleased with their performance. They were able to present very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.